Hello, everybody. Welcome back or welcome to Rethinking Resources. Thanks for joining us. I am Steve Shade. In this episode, we will be looking at the true arrival of geothermal energy, that very important last link that is connecting this infinite renewable resource with population centers around the world. The group making this happen is Eavor, a next-generation geothermal energy company. Eavor, and that is spelled E-A-V-O-R, but pronounced Eavor, has introduced the Everloop, which represents the world's first truly scalable geothermal energy solution. And when we say world, that's exactly what we mean. Eavor is promising clean, reliable, and affordable energy on a global scale. So it is super exciting. And here to tell us about it is Dr. Carsten Reinhold, Geoscience Manager at Eavor. Carsten Reinhold, thank you very much for being with us on Rethinking Resources.
Steve, I'm pleased to meet you. Thank you for inviting me here to this OMV podcast and to give me the opportunity to talk a little bit about our exciting technology.
You're very welcome. It's great to have you here. So let's get right down to what the Everloop actually is. And to make it super clear, maybe it's helpful to talk about what it is not. It is not fracking. It does not use vast amounts of groundwater. It doesn't cause earthquakes. It doesn't produce greenhouse gases, brine, or solids, and it does not contaminate aquifers. So, what exactly is it?
Yeah, Steve, you already described very well what an Everloop is not. So I will try to explain a little bit what an Everloop is all about. So an Everloop is basically an closed loop geothermal systems where you basically drill into a tight rock. So you don't need an aquifer, you don't need a permeable reservoir. So you're just drilling into a tight rock as deep as possible. And you connect your inlet and your outlet well with many multilateral horizontal or slanted legs, which are connected at the toes of each of these legs, creating a circle or basically a closed loop buried pipe system. In that pipe system, we introduce only once water as a technical fluid to transport the heat from the subsurface to the surface. And that is based simply on conduction. So that means that you harvest the heat directly from the rocks, from the bedrock. And because the technical fluid in the well bores is heating up, you have a heated fluid in the subsurface and a colder fluid at the surface. Because of the density difference between hot and cold fluid, you start that the water is circulating. So you don't need a downhole pump to bring the hot water to surface. It's simple thermodynamics. It's called the thermosiphon effect. And that is, as I said, purely based on density differences of the water. If you have the hot water at surface, you have just a simple heat exchanger and you transfer the heat to a district heat network, for example, of a city, or you can produce power and put the power into the power grid. That both options are possible.
Okay, so that's a pretty technical answer, but the picture is becoming clearer in my mind. I think it makes it easier for me to understand by, again, saying what it's not. You told us a bit about what it is, but what makes your technology truly different from other technologies that are trying to accomplish the same thing?
If you compare classic geothermal, so we call it normal hydro geothermal. Why hydro? Because you're looking for hot groundwater. And there are other techniques like enhanced geothermal systems where you rely on fracking because you have a tight rock and you have to frack it to create permeability. So you need somewhere to flow the water in the ground. And that is something we don't need. So we are not relying on hot water. We are not relying on a permeable reservoir. It's more like a underfloor heating system or radiator we are using, as we are just collecting the heat directly from the bedrock.
Okay, so your approach involves tapping into the resource as a radiator instead of a reservoir. Why is that such an important difference?
The difference is basically that we are reducing tremendously the exploration risk, and we are literally able to drill everywhere in the world, an Everloop, because heat is everywhere in the ground. If you just go every 100 meters deeper into the ground, you're gaining 3 degrees Celsius. So drilling deep means getting hotter temperatures. That is what we call deep geothermal. That makes a big difference, because hydrothermal, as I said, you need both to be successful. And we in Germany, as a miners and geologists, we say it's gloomy in front of the hoe. And that what it doesn't mean. That means that you never know what you will get before you drilled it. Therefore, there's always a risk involved. And there are many projects in the world which basically failed because they either didn't find a hot aquifer, or the permeability, we call it, so the possibility to move fluid in that rock was so low that you cannot basically produce heat out of that hydrothermal system. And that is where we are basically overcome that problem. So reduce extremely the exploration risk. We are able to scale worldwide our technology because we are not anymore relying on specific geological situations in the ground. So we are literally able to deploy our technology worldwide.
So you're taking the risk and the guesswork out of it?
Yeah, I would say yes.
Okay. Well, that'll put people at ease, because when I heard you mention things like risk and you never know. Okay. So your approach allows you to know much more in advance before you start the drilling.
Exactly.
Okay. Then let's zoom out a little bit. I think we started by going in pretty specific. So let's zoom out. Tell us, what are the real climate benefits that a transition to geothermal brings?
Look, summer 2023 was pretty the hottest on record. And with a lot of special or difficult weather situations across Europe, or most of Europe. So I think we are really in the urgent need to switch to renewable energy much faster, much stronger than what we did already. We need renewable energy which is reliable, firm, scalable, and dispatchable. If you're looking for wind and solar, for example, that wind and solar is not always available, of course. Wind is not always blowing, not everywhere. Sunlight, of course, is only during daylight, and if it's not cloudy. You need something which can create the baseload energy, and both its power and heat, and even cooling. Cooling getting more and more important these days, to cool down cities during hot summer days. Therefore, that makes a big difference. That we are able to scale up and to be it's virtually possible to deploy an Everloop everywhere in the world.
Okay, so coming back to how important geothermal energy is and how it's been pursued as this great promise for so long. It's supposed to be clean, this infinite source of energy. Now, apparently Eavor has figured out how to tap into it with no negative side effects. Is that true, or is there a catch that we're missing?
There are always benefits and obstacles for every technology in the world, I would say. As I said, the benefit, of course, it's firm, it's dispatchable, it's scalable. That I think that's very important for renewable energies these days, to be able to provide 24/7 energy to the cities, to municipalities, to the industry, to everywhere. But of course, it comes with some costs. There's heavy investment involved in drilling an Everloop. Just imagine you have to drill very deep wells with many legs. So in total, just one leg can be deep 7-8 kilometers. That's the height of the Mount Everest we are drilling. And of course, there's a lot of cost involved in this one. However, as we want to drill as many as possible Everloops at one location, you can not only scale up the production, of course, because with every Everloop you're adding more capacity to the system. You also are able to bring the cost down, because you have a steep learning curve, a steep learning effect. If you drill 12 or 24 times the same geology in the subsurface, you exactly know what you get. So you have a steep learning curve, and steep learning curve means in drilling you reduce the time of drilling, and therefore also the costs.
What is Eavor? A Canadian company, and is this actually relevant to your global strategy and your global vision? We're talking about energy technology, energy policy, something that countries typically want to control themselves. So is this significant for you as a player?
I would say not really. Eavor is a technology-based Canadian company. That's right. Our head office is in Calgary, in Alberta, state of Alberta. However, we have offices in the US, in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Japan. We have a very international team of professionals. We have very international stakeholders, including OMV. Therefore, I think Eavor is already a global company. And we have a lot of footprints already and business relationships to many countries in the world. And we see there's a very, very strong interest in our technology worldwide. So therefore, and as I said, we are more technology provider. Yeah? We are not able to drill every Everloop in the world ourselves. That will last probably the next 200 years if we just do it on our own. So what we need, of course, is other companies stepping in, taking over our technology. Our technology is IP protected. Every company which is technically capable to drill deep wells, deep horizontal multilateral wells, and this is mainly the oil and gas companies in the world. They are able, this is their normal business, day-to-day business, drilling deep wells. So they can take our technology and plan and drill themselves all these wells. And that will basically spread our technology across the world. It's like a seed which is carried in the wind and it's landed somewhere and starts spreading. So I think every project we are delivering is basically gives a base for more projects.
So it seems like the business model is to cooperate, collaborate, and expand through that.
Exactly, Steve. So, of course, Eavor is not able to drill every single Everloop in the world in the future. That would last too many years. And, this switch to renewable energy, that is something we have to do quick. In the next, let's say, 10 to 20 years latest. So, of course, we need the support of other companies. And that is basically, or is based on that we are able to provide our IP-protected technology to other companies which are technical, able to drill deep wells. And that is mainly the oil and gas industry, of course. That is their day-to-day business to drill deep wells. Therefore, these companies, they will take over our technology because they are also basically under pressure to switch or to move from oil and gas to more sustainable businesses. So therefore, this will help us to spread our technology across the planet.
In terms of things that have held geothermal energy back from this scaled global usage, you mentioned earlier that there are big costs up front. You just told us about how you're gaining some momentum. But let's review the big challenges and how Eavor is overcoming these.
That's a very valid question, Steve. So basically, there are different types of renewables. So I talked about wind and solar. That's not always available. So you step into geothermal, in principle geothermal, where you have a base load and always available heat and power source. However, as I mentioned before, you have the classic systems where you have some exploration risk. So you probably drill 2, 3, 4 wells which are dry because you didn't find the hot water aquifer. You have to step away or find another solution. Then you have the enhanced geothermal systems where you basically drill into a tight rock. And for that, you need fracking to create permeability for the water. Fracking, of course, comes with some induced seismicity risks. In many countries, at least in Europe, fracking is not allowed anymore, or with very strong environmental obligations from the states. So therefore, that is not really an option to scale it and to deploy it everywhere. And that's where the Everloop comes in. So we are able to provide our geothermal energy nearly virtually everywhere.
It's not easy, though. At your flagship project in Geothermal, which opened to great fanfare in Bavaria in August of 2023, you are drilling to a depth of 4,500 meters. Overall, on that site alone, there's around 60 kilometers of drilling involved. We are talking about a huge operation over a period of several years that involves significant costs, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Steve. It's a huge operation. I never seen that before in my life. We are not drilling only 60 kilometers. That's only for one loop and only the horizontal legs. In total, we are planning to drill 4 loops. So in total, we will drill 360 kilometers. Wow. So that is really, really impressive. Basically, at the moment, we already drilled the 2 longest geothermal wells in the world. At site. By the way, as I said, we have 2 rigs drilling contemporaneously. And these 2 rigs are the biggest land rigs available in Europe at the moment. And there are more than 100 workers on site, not only for the drilling operations, because at the same time where we are drilling, we are already building the power plant or the combined heat and power plant. And the idea is to start production in Geretsried end of this year. So we are still building and drilling at the same time.
When I look back at the press coverage and how the opening was documented, it really seemed like the whole world, in your world, the whole energy world was there. You look at the international presence, the political presence, there was a huge buzz around it. Has that buzz continued or has it tapered off or has it increased?
No, there's really, really a strong interest from everywhere. So, of course, in Germany, all the municipalities are looking to Geretsried. They are very much interested in the technology. They have to transform their old gas or coal fire plants to renewable. And especially the baseload is a key here. Yeah? Because the municipalities, they cannot only rely on solar and wind. So they need some baseload energy provider. And of course, without any risk, because there's a lot of money involved, and they have to be sure that at the end they can get some heat out of the ground for the district heating network. So the energy change is more a heat story rather than a power story. So heat is very important these days because many big cities have a district heating network, and they have to subsidize their fossil plants they are currently running.
We briefly touched on your collaborative strategy, but tell us more specifically about how you're working with partners like OMV to enhance Eavor's capabilities and make geothermal energy accessible to more and more people.
Yeah, exactly. So we have very international shareholders. Some are oil and gas companies, some are more utility companies. They have some need for power and heat production in their home countries. With that, of course, financial background of our shareholders, and of course, there's a technical background, especially from the oil and gas companies like OMV. We are able to develop our projects much, much faster than just doing it on our own. It's just a matter of manpower. OMV is a large company with a wealth of experience, especially in drilling. They will basically develop their own Everloops with using our technology, but being in the driver's seat.
Have they enhanced your strategy or your technology when you bring in a company like OMV that has its own skill set and its own expertise? Has that led to greater opportunities?
Of course, OMV is a strong supporter of our technology. They are also promoting our technology. That, of course, helps us a lot, because if a company, an internationally working company like OMV, is promoting our technology from a smaller tech company, that is definitely supportive for us.
When you go global, you're dealing with varied conditions. Sometimes the location will allow you to go shallow. Sometimes you have to go very deep. Eavor has 3 types of technology to address different scenarios. So tell us briefly about Everlight, Everloop, and Everloop 2.0.
Yeah, we'll do. Basically, it's not about shallow or deep.
Okay.
Because, of course, there's shallow geothermal as well. This is the small probes you use in the backyard of your house to heat up a single house or a small compound or whatever. So, but we are really going into the deep geothermal. And deep geothermal means we just drill as deep as possible, because with every 100 meter depth, you gain 3 degrees Celsius of heat. And that's the reason why we try to drill as deep as possible, 7-8 kilometers in some cases. That's what I said is the height of the Mount Everest. And you're able to know exactly where you are. You're at surface and you know exactly where you are in 8 kilometers depth. So that is, I think, very, very impressive technology. But that is drilling technology. So you mentioned Everlight. Everlight is our demonstration project in Canada. It's basically in the Canadian Rocky Mountain forelands. Virtually, it's only nature there. And then you see our small facility there standing around. and there are some pipes at surface, and if you touch these pipes, you feel the heat, and you know that heat comes from several thousand meters from the underground, and that's really impressive. But still, it's a demonstration plant, so it's still 2 vertical wells, so it's an inlet and outlet well to bring the heat up to surface and bring the cold water down, and there are basically only 2 legs which are connected. So the first commercial application, that is what we called Everloop 1.0. And that means that we are drilling again 2 vertical wells, and then we connect these 2 vertical wells to multilateral horizontal legs, which are connected at their toes. And why horizontal or sub-horizontal? That is because this technology we apply in, we call it sedimentary basins, like the Vienna Basin here just beneath our feet. That is something where you could apply that because we want to stay within a certain type of rock or geology, and that in a sedimentary basin it normally has a distinct thickness. So that's the reason why we want to drill along the dip. We call that the dip of the rocks of the formation, and that helps us, or that is the need why we're doing horizontal or sub-horizontal. And the other technical application is Eavor 2.0, and that goes really deep into the crystalline basement. So that's something that's really beneath everything in a couple of kilometers depth, and that is basically kind of an indefinitive thick reservoir. So there's no need to drill horizontal. So we are drilling only 20 or 30 degrees with an angle into the subsurface. So the goal is always the same, to drill as deep as possible, to get as much heat out of the ground as possible. And it's just basically reflecting the different geology in the ground. So that is, again, our way to scale it up and to make it available for nearly every geological situation in the world.
The technology is astounding, but we come to this super important question again. Is it really scalable on a global level? Can you do this anywhere efficiently and cost effectively?
Yes. The short answer would be yes. Eavor strongly believes in it. With the partnership with our shareholders, also with other companies which can invest in our technology, also oil and gas companies taking over or applying our technology in their own projects, we are able to spread our technology really across the world. We have so many projects basically in the development, in discussions with basically really worldwide on all 5 continents. So there's really a strong interest in it. So that definitely helps us to spread our technology. As mentioned before, you're right. Cost efficiency is a major goal to bring drilling costs down, and the key here is drilling not only 1 Everloop at one location, drilling 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 Everloops at one location. Especially for big cities, for big industries, they need a lot of heat. They have a high heat demand, so therefore there is a need for drilling a lot of Everloops at one location. And drilling many Everloops at one location, it's scaling up the demand and the production. And on the other hand, with a learning curve, drilling always the same geology several times, you gain a lot of experience. You gain a lot of knowledge. And you see that everywhere in the world where you have projects where they drilled many wells at the same location. Is it in oil fields, in gas fields, in geothermal fields? As soon as you start re-drilling always the same geology, you're gaining knowledge, and that means you're reducing drilling time, and reduced drilling time means you reduce costs. And that is the overall goal.
Then let's look forward to some of the big highlights that we can expect that are in the pipeline, so to say. What will be happening in the coming years, and how will this new technology actually touch the lives of people in our audience?
Asking your first question is we have a lot of projects in the pipeline, as already indicated, and we have and of course I can't talk about all of them, but probably just highlight on 2. Both are in Germany. One is in Hanover, which is the state capital of the state of Lower Saxony in northern Germany. And the municipality here in Hanover, they want to replace their coal-fire plants with 2 Everloops. And that will basically should cover 20% of the heat demand of the city. of a city of 500,000 people living in Hanover. Yeah, so the second example is in southern Germany, in Bavaria. It's a city called Neu-Ulm. Here we want to deploy the first time in Germany our Eavor 2.0 technology, which is very exciting. So we did it already in the US, in New Mexico 2 years ago. But this time it will be the first time in Germany, in Europe, outside the US or North America.
There's a tremendous amount of activity in Germany, so let's stay there. In March, Germany made a very exciting announcement saying that just because of how it has increased the use of renewable energy and reduced its reliance on non-renewables, you mentioned the movement away from coal, it has been able to sort of underline, say, it expects to reach its 2030 climate targets. That's big. That's bold. So we're talking about Europe's largest economy and this big success story that should mean reaching climate neutrality by 2045. I imagine that Everloop, as you have stated, is going to play a big part in that vision.
Yeah, so we want to be, and we will be a big part in that vision. So as you correctly mentioned, Germany wants to be climate neutral until 2045, the European Union until 2050. So there's ambitious goals, I would say. The only way to reach that is switching to renewable energy, definitely. And of course to reduce greenhouse emissions, especially with big industries like chemical and cement and construction and so on. And of course, as I mentioned before, there are several options. But for baseload renewable, there are not too many options. And that's definitely geothermal is one of the key drivers for baseload energy, providing around the clock power, heat and cooling. We definitely want to be or will be part of it because Germany has a favorable underground, favorable subsurface for geothermal. There are many places in Germany where hydrothermal will work, but there are even more places where hydrothermal is not working. And here we're stepping in, as we don't need, as explained before, hot aquifers. So we are basically jumping in wherever hydrothermal is not working. And if you look to the German landscape, the geological map, you will see many locations where only a closed loop system will work.
And just to land this, let's come back to the big vision. If geothermal energy is really, truly scaled on a global scale, what will the benefits be to everybody? Paint us a picture of a geothermal energy-powered future.
So I think our vision is that geothermal provides energy everywhere at any time. We're talking about gigawatt, not megawatt. We need to go that route. So that is a tremendous goal. But I think, with the help of many others, we are able to provide at least a certain and important part of it.
Everywhere at any time, clean and reliable. That's a nice vision.
Definitely.
Okay. Carsten Reinhold, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, sharing your ideas, your insights with us here today on Rethinking Resources. To everybody listening or watching the episode on OMV's YouTube channel, if you have feedback, if you have questions, please send a message to podcast@omv.com. We would love to hear from you. For more background information on the topics we discussed in this episode and our guest, check out our show notes where you'll find links to lots of valuable information. Thanks for sharing your time with us, and we hope you will join us again for the next episode of Rethinking Resources.